Okay, welcome everyone to Dev Summit, virtual one. 2 weeks after PromCon, actually, very soon, but we have lots of topics. I still have Club Mate from Berlin waiting for me for this opportunity. And let's start. Let's spend still like 1 minute on going through the topics, making sure the votes are there for what we want to discuss, but I will be slowly picking the winner. Sounds like we have type and unit in Prometheus having 9 votes. Then we have community channels which are closed, 8 votes. Security is in sorry state, 8 votes. 8 votes on query screenshots for Alt Manager. And that's kind of the top voted ones. So if now objections, I would go for type and unit in Prometheus. So getting that from the agenda. Who would like to help with note-taking?
I can try my best while I'm not speaking. I have a hard time speaking and writing at the same time.
Thank you, Arthur. Okay, let's go. David, would you like to maybe introduce us to this topic?
Sure. So this is sort of revisiting a topic from the previous Dev Summit that there was a long Slack channel on. The previous one we had consensus or rough consensus that we want to be able to keep the original OpenTelemetry names without suffixes. But one of the issues that was raised on Slack was that this makes it likely, especially given all the changes OpenTelemetry makes to their conventions right now, that people are going to have collisions between, one metric with the unit seconds and another metric with the unit milliseconds. And there was a lot of great discussion. And what I did was I wrote a document, which is linked from here, that mostly summarizes the ideas presented in the Slack thread and tries to document some of the concerns that people had. And I also tried to put some rather explicit goals for what we're trying to achieve with these different designs. From a very high level view, there's kind of 3 different flavors of solution we could have. There's the naive solution where we just drop them and hope for the best. There's a partial solution, which I think is option C here, which is that we can add aliases for metric names. I call this a partial solution because it still, for the most part, doesn't prevent type collisions, but because Prometheus naming conventions include the unit in the name, it does prevent unit collisions. And this has been good enough for Prometheus for a while, so maybe it's good enough for us going forward. The one maybe new thing here is that you could have, in theory, a collision between points that are complex, like a native histogram, and a point that's a float that we wouldn't be able to resolve. So that's one flavor of solution. And then in this doc, B and D are both 2 ways that we could make type and unit part of, or basically make them identifying for Prometheus metrics, right? If we explicitly add them as special suffixes to the name, or if we explicitly add them as labels. But both of those are going to likely be more user visible. But they do fully solve this uniqueness and collision problem. So what I'm hoping to get from this discussion is, one, introduce it to people. It would be good to have consensus on the overall direction we feel comfortable taking, whether we want a full or partial solution. And then we did talk about this at the Prometheus work group yesterday, and with some of the people that are involved with this OpenTelemetry compatibility work. And we were leaning towards adding them as labels, prototyping that as a first step. So confirming that here with the broader group would be helpful if that's the direction others think is right to go.
Arthur.
I was in the call yesterday, and I already forgot. Like, if we add the units and type as a suffix with the special operator, we are changing the metric name, right? And our goal is to let hotel users have their metrics without name changes.
Yes. So if we can share the doc and scroll down, the idea would be that we would have to change how querying works, where users can still query for the name without suffixes, but that it would return metrics that included any unit or type the same way it does today. So that's how we would, or not
Okay,
how we
okay.
would have to, but there's some, you would have to implement something presumably to make it so that users aren't forced to query for this, or we could push it on users, but that seems less optimal.
And by the way, all of this are just, YOLO example, like we can
Yes.
use different characters, different operators, but the idea is kind of like clear, like we are either overloading metric name with those special operators on how to get to the metadata for units and type, or we just use another labels. Those kind of like two main discussion points. Fabian was first.
Just wondering, we had this topic at the in-person Dev Summit. So what changed since then? Because we already had a vote for consensus. So are there news, or is it just second thoughts, or what's happening?
What do we refer to?
Yeah, so the consensus was that we wanted to keep OpenTelemetry metric names as is, right? And I think basically what happened was Gotham raised the issue of time series identity and the differences between it and OpenTelemetry and Prometheus. So in OpenTelemetry, the type in unit is identifying. In Prometheus, the unit is de facto identifying because it's normally a suffix. And the type is not identifying, right? I can have a counter and a gauge with the same name from different applications, and I can query over them just fine. Not that the results will necessarily make sense. But so we're trying to solve, like, if we remove suffixes from the name, we now potentially introduce this issue of uniqueness.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now I remember. So exactly the point is like the consensus is not possible to implement, essentially. Like we cannot allow not adding those suffixes, or like, yeah, it's not usable.
Well, it's not so much that if there are two metrics that have the same name but different types, which I don't think is going to be common, but we do need a way to query the specific one you mean if there is such a collision. My sense from the operator approach is sort of we are blessing certain specific pieces of metadata, the type and the unit, as a special category that can be queried in this new way. This is something I've sort of noticed with metrics, is that we have like these different layers of metadata that are accessed in different ways. You've got the metric name, which is a special case of a label. You got your labels, and now we've got this sort of new metadata stuff from like target info that sort of joins in. Now we've got unit and type that there's sort of these layers of specialness to different types of metadata. And I guess the question is, at least for unit and type, are they special enough that they need special treatment in the syntax versus the label approach? And I see in the cons for the label approach, So basically, if I had these two metrics that had the same name but different types, would it be sufficient to just go, throw in, okay, the type for this one equals milliseconds or whatever it is. And I think that some of the cons were more around like, oh no, now what if I wanted to get all metrics of a certain type, and that's going to be really slow. I guess stating an opinion, my first inclination is to make them a label, a label that is sort of has a special name, and that we would only want to do a syntax update if there was a really compelling reason to do that. If we feel like these labels are especially, this piece of metadata is especially needs to be treated specially in code and have separate code paths and all the syntax and everything.
Makes sense. Thank you. Bjorn.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I mean, this is super intriguing to me because for very different reasons, I had like very similar thoughts. And this is also like alludes to what Owen just said and about those collisions. We do have those problems even without OTel, which is good, which does change. And the one thing is that you could see it when open metrics try to like have the proper name without suffix as the canonical name. Then we found out that we already have this pattern where people have foobar_total for a counter version, and then they have foobar without _total for a gauge version. Like Go has this, funny enough, Go client Golang in the Go metrics, but this is a pattern that is like not super common, but that a bunch of people have. Like whenever you have something, total is the number of allocations ever done, and without total, it's the current value of allocated bytes or something, right? And open metrics accidentally or not accidentally, I don't know, made this impossible, right? So this is one instance where the type is actually like, it would be much nicer to have it identifying and have those two different flavors of kind of the samely named metric. I think, I mean, this pattern organically happened because it was possible in the traditional Prometheus world. And I think it's legitimate, right? We could decide to kick it out, but maybe it's actually good. And the other thing is now with native histograms, where suddenly the type is not just like the soft information in the background, like it's all afloat, but I know by suffix or by convention that this is actually a gauge or a counter. We have native histograms which are actually treated technically very differently. And now we have this problem where we have a million little case statements in the code. What happens if you get this mixed series case, right? You switch from a gauge and then you switch to a metric with a native histogram with the same name, or you have like two different targets that expose for the same name different types, and suddenly you need a technical way of handling that. And it would also be nice to de-ambiguate this in some way, right? And this was the moment where I thought we need some special type label, right? Which could be treated differently in UI, could be treated differently in aggregations and all that, like what we all have in the document now as well, like it's kind of mirrored. But of course, it needs a lot of thoughts how to do this right. I had one final thought here where this would actually come in quite handy. Damn it. The conclusion is missing now. We can go on with somebody else. I will come back when I remember the conclusion here.
Amazing. Arthur?
Yeah, I'm trying to read the room. Like feeling like everybody is slowly merging to the new label idea.
Now Bjorn recalled.
Yeah, now, because Owen triggered this when he said, is it worth to have like specific syntax constructs for it, right? And now we get to it where I think, like we always say, PromQL is a statically typed language, and the types are like strings and number literals and range selectors and like all those things, but we do not statically type the metric type, right? So we were just saying, yeah, of course you can only apply rate to a counter and not to a gauge. And now we do something like with the annotations where we say you apply rate to a metric that isn't called underscore total in the end. So maybe it's not a counter, but that's like very like a sad state essentially, right? And the thing where the specific syntax comes to mind is if we had like a specific syntax and we knew like a counter ends on / counter or something, right? Then we would have static typing essentially, right? So we could already, by looking at the query, we could say you're doing something wrong, right? And it could be, and this leads back to what I came up with like years ago when I ran into this native histogram collision. It could even be something that like you don't specify / counter or / histogram, but your rate function would only look at the version of the metric that has / counter, right? And if it's a function that actually works on multiple types, it would actually apply to both types. Like a rate could be applied to a histogram, it could be applied to a counter. So if you do rate foobar, it would do the rate of foobar underscore counter if it exists, and then the outcome, yeah, now we need something that needs still to be labeled in a way, right? So we don't get a collision then if the rate could just apply to both flavors, but then the outcome must not collide, right? So there is something in it where I think we are very close to something where we could have a statically typed thing where essentially the parser could define if this is correct. But then there are many little things that need to be thought through. But it could be a reason why we need some first-class syntax here.
Sounds like you're supportive. You are supportive to add types into labels or some other way. That's what you are saying. Okay, Fabian, go on.
Just trying to think of how to use it, because I mean, just because the information is there in a label doesn't mean it's useful, right? So if you have whatever, some latency metrics, and you have, for example, different instances, and you want to plot them, and then you say sum by instance of this thing, right? Then the unit will be gone, right? It will not be part of the result. You will not see it. It will be away, right? And we know, I mean, OpenTelemetry famously has a wide mix of units, right? gRPCs milliseconds, HTTP seconds, and so forth. So for practical purposes, like, would you even see the unit in queries, in graphs, in query results, and so forth?
And you may sum over different units accidentally.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that our first goal is avoid a time series collision. And if we ever use these extra labels for new things, that's probably going to be done later. Like, but I think, yeah, sorry.
I can also share like what I had in mind is that if we made type and unit identifying, then that at least gives users the tools to resolve problems they might have. So if they do mix seconds and milliseconds, and they're able to query for either see the units in the results and notice the difference, then like you could do one query for seconds and one query for milliseconds, and like divide one by, like you could resolve it in your query if you had to, but without keeping this information, you wouldn't be able to.
I mean, I 100% agree that having the unit as a label is better than the idea of not having the unit at all. But I'm still a little bit torn on, wouldn't it be even better to keep the unit as a prefix, as a suffix, right? Because then you would even see it in the query result. You would even, if you have a YAML with queries, you would see it, right? It's identifying without even adding extra labels and so forth. So not sure, like, if going from suffix to label, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Bjorn, you're next.
I mean, the problem is this whole like how to use this as a label or some special first class new thing. The problem is that it needs a lot of thought to make it all consistent. So there are naturally very good questions to poke holes into it. But one thing when Fabian said that, what do we do with like the unit label being aggregated away accidentally? That would actually justify why this is a special beast, right? And not just a normal label. What like, who said that? Like, Owen said that. Is it worth to have the special handling? And that would be the special handling where we say, like, if we sum up something, the unit must match, and the aggregation in this case keeps the unit, right? So you could even sum up stuff, like it would implicitly essentially sum up by unit. Of course, there are a lot of gotchas with that, right? If you want to convert something or all those things, right? But that would also ask for treating it some way special, like, and you could say the stuff in the name is also like less than perfect. If you want to convert milliseconds into seconds, you multiply it by 1,000, then the name doesn't magically change, right? So I mean, it could be something that maybe works out better. But I think because somebody said we should time box this, right? I mean, since I had very similar thoughts coming from a very different direction, it feels like this could be explored more, right? And then, I mean, I hate this if we say just vertical sign log as the result, but yeah, I would love to think through like edge cases and how this could maybe solve multiple problems in one go.
Okay. So, and you specifically mean, Bjorn, the adding those types to labels, or just much more broad topic of like being able to identify by type?
I think we probably in practice want something incrementally, right? And I definitely think, coming back to the consensus from the Dev Summit, that for like tomorrow we need something where users can pick their poison and decide if they just want the auto prefixing when they ingest something coming from OTel, or if they don't want the prefixes and take their own risk that they get collisions or something, but they get the advantage of whatever, not change label names. And then we might want to see something like incrementally that adds a bit or changes a bit that helps. But like what I would also like to see is like some vision what could be done in Prometheus version 4, right? And if that is something like we have a syntactical way of selecting the type of a metric, right? Which would allow us to never ever rate a gauge again, and never have mixed histograms and floats or something. And at the same time, we get this information from OTel, and we never get name collision. I don't know where the units fit in there. Maybe it is a similar idea. This is what I would like to see in like a more visionary document, but that is probably not something that we can implement next month and have ready for users. But I would like to keep this on the radar, essentially.
Okay, let's really time box this. So maybe spend 3 minutes more at most. Okay, so what I'm hearing is we'd like to maybe explore it. Owen?
Yeah, I just want to try to restate consensus to see if this is sort of what we're talking about. It sounds like we're talking about a way to do type annotation in PromQL aside from looking at suffixes. So in other words, a way to annotate the query so that you know what the type and or unit are. Is that accurate?
No, I think our goal is to avoid name collisions when ingesting.
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's keep both essentially. I think it's so we have one around type annotations in PromQL, collisions in PromQL, and now Arthur is saying about ingestion, but
actually thinking again, I think that's the same thing,
similar,
just said in a different way.
Yeah, I would be fine with annotations. Like they kind of solve collisions, but also the rates and kind of like querying part that Bjorn proposes. So perhaps annotation would be fun. Anyone of what kind of I would like to change something before we try to call for consensus. Okay, let's Arthur.
I had the impression that we wanted a design doc for the label option.
I guess that's part of the exploration part.
Okay.
So that's fine. Okay, let's do consensus first. So, okay, who agree with this consensus? We want to explore ways to do type and unit annotations in PromQL. Please raise your hand if you agree. Please, okay, and anyone objects? Please raise your hand. Amazing. Okay, I think we're good. All right, let's go to a different topic. Artur.
I'm not sure if I'm the only one confused, but we on this consensus we don't talk about anything related to name collisions.
I think that's where the type on unit annotation helps, right? And that's the only kind of use cases of name collision we were discussing in this part, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think it's, well, I interpreted that as being implicit in being able to query for
Okay. If I'm the only one confused, let's just move forward.
All right, so we have 7, 8, 8. Wow, 3 8 topics. Community channels. Let's go for it. Let's try. Bjorn, would you like to start us up?
There's the topic. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I mean, not everyone is in every Dev Summit, right? But this is essentially something that we discuss usually at the in-person Dev Summit. Just 2 weeks ago, we didn't get to it, and it's kind of my yearly lament about how awful Slack is, but that it eats the world. And I have very fundamental problems with Slack, but a more practical problem I see is it's so hard if like somebody like we get, it's great, right? We get a lot of new contributors that come to me and ask me like, what can I ask, what I can contribute to, or like, I would like to do something in PromQL, like where can I talk to the PromQL experts? And then I tell them, yeah, if you want to talk to Julius, you probably go onto the developer mailing list. If you want to talk to Ganesh, you probably go better to Slack. And I mean, that's a really bad state where we have no like canonical place of like sending people to if they want to talk to us. And I was generally always very sad about fragmented community, but I kind of made my peace with that, as in like everyone has preferences and the community is so big that we can probably fill a mailing list and an IRC channel and a Slack channel and some discuss forum or something, right? But what I see right now, and this is also what triggered me to bring this back up, like if I now look at IRC, the traffic on the IRC dev channel is essentially 0, right? I think for at least 6 months, there was not a single message on that channel. And like keeping, as much as I would prefer IRC over Slack, damn you, I think there's no reason to keep this channel open, where like some people might like have the expectation that they can reach somebody, but then you have like, I'm still watching it, right? But who else is, right? So that's a huge problem. And the user channel has some traffic, but like mostly Ben giving some support to a few handful of users. And now even the mailing list is like Slack eating the world, right? The mailing list, at least the user mailing list, had a lot of traffic. And I tried to kind of weekly catch up with it. And this week there was zero mails on the users mailing list, which is, I think, never happened. So even that seems like increasingly abandoned. And I mean, yeah, if we had like a commitment that we like everyone who shows up there will get an answer, but I think this will just organically not happen. And then people see this, it's spelled out on our community page, they join those channels, and then silence, right? I mean, that's a bad impression, but also not very helpful for the people. And And this is why I always bring up this topic is, yeah, we need some consensus where everyone can be met. And I think so far the consensus was everyone should listen to the Prometheus developer mailing list, which could still stay true, right? But it's just it's just nothing is happening on that developer mailing list. And in fact, everything is happening essentially on Slack. And even Julius says sometimes there now. And yeah, I don't know, like we need something, right? And I think the pragmatic path would be to just declare Slack as the official community channel, as bad as this is. But you could also do other stuff, like you could seriously tell CNCF, what the fuck? Like, why do you pay Slack instead of having a proper chat solution that is not a black hole, that has takeout, that is indexable, whatever, right? Which I think will not help, right? But at least we could say it, right? I don't know. It's kind of a bad situation to be in, but we have to navigate it in some way. That's kind of why I like to bring this up. Okay, so discuss.
Amazing. I think Owen, you are next.
Yeah, I just wanted to put in a word for an alternative platform. I can put on my little sales hat. So I'm at another open source project that uses Zulip for its chat, and it has been incredible for us. I think it doesn't have the best mobile app, but the thing that it gets right is this mix between sync and async. The threading model is basically better than anything I've used anywhere else, whether it's Discord, Slack, Matrix, whatever. It lets you move topics around. It lets you move groups of messages around. We have hundreds of people on it. We have our core developer team on it. We have our regular development on it. The Zulip people love having open source projects use them. So I think it's you can run it yourself or you can pay them to run it. But in this case, they run it for us. I love it. I wish other people would use its threading model, the way it lets you, basically you have individual channels, but then within those you have streams of conversation. And so you can restrict to a single stream or look at the full flood for that channel. Anyway, it's been great. I think it's worth a look if people are looking to jump platforms.
Are we planning to jump?
Yeah, Arthur. What?
That was the question.
Can you repeat?
Are we planning to jump? Like from what I understood, like we are trying to make official what is already happening. Like everybody is in Slack. Let's just say that Slack is official.
I mean, if that's a better idea, then I think everything is on the paper. But there is a truth that it takes time to bring community together, and CNCF is using Slack. And that where the majority of people seems to be, but I'm biased because I'm not on IRC and other stuff. But yeah, I think it's open. We can experiment. Can anyone remind me, David, maybe what OpenTelemetry is using? Because I remember they were using something else, and they, I think, tried to migrate to Slack. Like, did that work, or are they on Slack?
I think we've just been on Slack since inception.
Okay. There was something before. Okay, so Slack there. I actually mentioned on the chat, on the chat. But what about having a bot that will bring conversation from other places, like mails, at least maybe the initial mail into the Prometheus Dev Slack channel. There are ways to maybe integrate things. Björn.
Yeah, I mean, I think we tried to do some media convergence also with what was the chat Matrix thing, right? Was it Matrix? Where you have a more modern chat system that interacts with IRC. I mean, even Slack had an IRC gateway until they had enough weight to just cut this. Damn you, Slack. I will say this multiple times here. But I think the problem is more the other way, like taking more stuff into Slack. Okay, great. But like this experience, like it's also what I put in the introduction here, right? That you write in a GitHub issue, details are in this Slack thread, right? And then somebody who has no Slack account cannot read it because it doesn't even do a read-only access without account, right? This is just so bad. But it's even worse if we don't acknowledge that this is our official channel, right? So at least we could say we are very sorry about this, but this is the way you have to do if you want to interact with the project. This is then less bad than pretending that this is not the official channel. Although we could, of course, try to like be disciplined and put everything important on a, like when you discuss a GitHub issue, all the important information should be in the issue, right? Which could also, yeah, I mean, there's always this like the ephemeral thing and the eternal one, and this also where it might be weird to mirror mailing list mails to a chat channel or vice versa. I don't know, like it's, I mean, I think the one thing is what kind of, because Owen and Arthur were like just saying those things, if we really want to move to another platform, I mean, I don't think that's realistic, but if we want this, we need like full commitment by everyone. And then we could do this. Like I would be on board, but I doubt that we have like a 99% approval rating for this. But if that doesn't work, we have to do something like what Arthur said, right? We have to make official what is the practice anyway, even if it's a very bad practice.
Making a change like this to, for example, Zulip, this is probably something that our future steering committee could handle, like handling the migration. Yeah, but there is no committee yet.
Yeah, right now it is lazy consensus, right? I mean, I got tasked with updating this page a while ago, and I mean, I never find the time, but also it's a moving target, right? Whenever I want to write this up, I realize, okay, now actually even the mailing list is already almost dead, right? So should I just do the new version? I mean, I could just still put it on my list and then create a pull request, and we can discuss it on the pull request, and then I could just write down there, for better or worse, Slack is the place to be. But yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Kemal, do you want to say something?
Yeah, for maybe just a point to the eternal one. I mean, Kubernetes has this discuss forum. I don't know how it's maintained, whatnot, but I put a link. Maybe we can have something for Prometheus.
We do.
That would solve one of the problems.
So
But
this
yeah.
is what we did, right, multiple times, because every year I bring this up again. And Ben, I think, set up a discuss forum, or they helped us or whatever. And then we have another fragment of the community where like some things happen, but not a lot, right? I mean, if, as I said, like I made my piece of fragmentation if all the fragments are live, right? And for example, the users mailing list seemed like this is where you go if you have an SNMP exporter question or something. This might organically arise and it's fine, more or less, right? But if it doesn't work, if you have like a half-dead mailing list and a very dead IRC channel, and then a half-dead discourse, whatever, I don't know what the name is, area domain, that's just bad, right?
Is this a bad thing to have like more than one communication channel?
No, it's not if they're all alive, right? But if they're essentially dead, I think we should pull. I mean,
yeah, I totally agree. I think we should kill IRC if there's no traffic.
I mean,
Maybe we can
actively kill it. Maybe we should, but for one, we should not list it as the official channel if you can only meet like 10% of the people there, and nothing is happening.
Yeah, Arthur.
I'm hoping to get the discussion close soon. Are we reaching any consensus today besides like make it Slack official or not?
Owen, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's it is okay to have in the other project I'm on. It's okay to have multiple platforms as long as it's really clear what each of them is for. So we have one that's a forum that's like user discussions, and then the Zulip is developer discussions. And it having that be obvious which one is which makes it clear where you should go for a particular topic.
I agree. I was always confused why on some GitHub issues we close them like, oh, it should be user mailing list, and then people are doing this and no one is responding there because sometimes maybe it's just hard to respond on those. So I think we disagree again as a maintainer sometimes where we should forward people. Jan, you're next.
Yeah, maybe to sort of get this discussion forward a little bit. I wonder, do we really want to take on sort of administrative duties of any platform? If so, then I guess talking about Zulip or Matrix or whatever is valid. But right now, as far as I understand, CNCF just sets up the Slack for us, and we have a channel there. It sounds like we kind of like that service side of things. And if we're not willing to sort of get more engaged with something, then it seems moot to discuss other platforms.
Yeah, just my experience with Zulip is we don't have to do anything except moderation. And we did have a user come in and spam profanity in every possible channel. So like that did have to be handled. But in terms of the server stuff, there's no maintenance. Yeah, it's basically just who's a mod and that's it.
Okay.
But I don't want to undersell the switching cost of having everybody move over. Like that is a major thing to do.
What about the developer mailing list being less alive than usual? So I think with RIC, we kind of like see the movement to Slack. But I think Björn mentioned like important part where our dev mailing lists are kind of silent. And I experienced that a lot, where we did kind of like message about the secret, for example, secret design doc about like secret providers in Prometheus. No one responded except maybe me. And then we have to move the discussion to actually, Prometheus dev Slack channel and really ping people because it's synchronous. So what we can do for mailing lists? If anyone has any idea. Björn.
I mean, I'm fine if the mailing list is kind of more like an announce medium where like we can say like, I mean, we have literally Prometheus announced for releases, but it could also on the dev mailing list could be something where it just say this and this has changed now or whatever, right? Which I think it organically is almost like that, right? I think design docs that are already a pull request on proposals, they kind of have this natural announcement channel, but I mean, you could always just advertise things there. I think it's more important to have this idea where's actually the relevant discussion happening, to have like a clear statement about this. And I think historically we had lots of meaningful discussions on the developer mailing list. And it's so cool because like I think Google indexes it, right? It's at least it's a Google group, so they should index their own groups, right? and you kind of can look this up. You don't need an account. You have this eternal archive of everything. And that's all not true for Slack. But still, if it's not happening there, what can we do, right? I mean, I think the move really needs a true consensus where we essentially all say, yes, we are about to, like, whatever. We all go on Zulip and we mean it. We all mean it. And it's just like, I mean, very few people in this call signal that they would be willing to do this. That's why I think it's so unrealistic.
Julius.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, for like discussions, I think it's very tempting to always do them on Slack. But yeah, it's like so ephemeral. It's hard to find stuff again, and then it's not publicly visible unless you're logged in. So I would really like to keep the mailing lists at least, because yeah, maybe, I mean, I also recently probably posted the last message in there, and I was thinking when I posted it, like, just do it in Slack. But then I was thinking like, oh no, but I shouldn't expect everyone to actually see it in Slack, and then, you know, like the external world won't have that discussion to reference later. And you know, it's like in the short term, it's like very tempting to just do it on Slack, but then it's gone like after a while.
Yeah.
So
What about GitHub issues or discussions as a replacement for mailing list? They are referenced.
maybe
They have all those aspects that you mentioned.
I think we tried, and then what happened? Like, I think it never really took off, right? I think like the seducing thing of Slack is just like, oh yeah, it's my default window. It's open anywhere. It has all the blinking light. It distracts me from work all day long. So why not send more messages there anyway? Kind of hate it, but then you love it as well because it's just like this addictive productivity destroying machine. And so it's kind of hard to compete maybe with any other channel there. But yeah, I mean, I also like these other channels. The benefit, I guess, of the email inbox for me is that it's also a tab I always have open. So I always see when something is happening there, and then like a different GitHub tab, and also like even my issues and pull requests and so on, I often lose track of.
Makes sense. Let's time box this, but Bjorn, maybe some.
I mean, I think we are actually using GitHub I mean, there's definitely more technical discussion happening on GitHub issues than on the developer mailing list by now, right? And we kind of use the discussions feature, the literal discussions feature on GitHub as like a way to not just close issues that are not issues, but usage questions, right? So we could always say it's now a discussion, and then people could still chime in on a best effort basis. But I think organically we do a lot of meaningful discussions on GitHub issues, and that's great because you can search in Google. It's like read-only accessible, even if you don't have an account. And maybe we could also just embrace this. Like if we realize this is not really an issue yet, it's more like an open-ended discussion, maybe use the discussion feature more, but it's also not that different, right? It's more like a categorization than a super different experience. But it has this proximity thing, right? A lot of technical discussion is anywhere happening on GitHub, so why not use this as our preferred, like, permanent archive of technical discussions? Because that is partially, it has always been that, right? So it wouldn't be a big
I
change.
think that kind of makes sense. And I think in the olden times when the team was smaller, it also made more sense to send everything to Prometheus Dev, the mailing list, because you wanted everyone to see it. And nowadays, you know that maybe only 5 people need to see it. I think just for stuff that you still expect everyone to see, maybe then you will want to be like, hey, Prometheus Dev mailing list, like even just linking to the GitHub discussion just to make sure everyone actually sees it, because I think that's a consideration as well. With GitHub discussions that people open any day, like I probably wouldn't see them all, right? Unless I really check every little email notification.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can subscribe to things, and you get the discussions. If you like, say, I want all notifications from this repo, you also get the discussion.
Right.
So
it's possible. It's possible, but it's less meant maybe to be like this broadcast to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe what you just said, right? Maybe we are big enough to not be able to broadcast it. Yeah. I mean, I will definitely take the whole gist of this discussion and try again to like create a pull request against this community page to like, yeah, summarize what we have done here into some proposed result, and then we can see on the pull request if people like it, or if that's a consensus or could be a consensus for now. But yeah, I can't commit how soon I will be able to do this, but I'll try.
So do we need consensus on? Sounds like we are kind of want to try GitHub discussions more. Maybe something around Slack being actually official for more official, if that's even not stated clearly there. And then Bjorn, there's no need for consensus about that. But you will try to kind of like combine those, propose something on the PR. But anything around Slack and GitHub discussions and that we want to put in consensus?
I mean, we could kind of say something like we acknowledge that in practice, most of the discussion happen on Slack and GitHub rather than IRC and the mailing list. And we don't have a consensus that we want to change this collectively. I think that's maybe safe to say, right? This is what I read from the room, right? I mean, Owen wants to go to Zulip. I would totally be on board trying it, but I don't think that we get like 95% of the current active contributors to do that.
Yeah, and I'm not offering to do the work, so I'm just pointing out that there are alternatives if people hate Slack that much.
Yeah, acknowledging is fine, but like, is there any action on like making them more formally recommended? Would that be agreed among us for now, given the? So we acknowledge in practice that the most of discussions are happening in Slack and GitHub, not IRC or mailing list. We propose to, I don't know if you have consensus about that. Proposing around making them more recommended or recommend them more.
Yeah, I mean, you can write into the consensus that Björn will work on an update to the community page. I think we had this a year ago already. I didn't do it, but yeah. But I mean, it's something like, I mean, I think even this is already a statement because that then at least you cannot use the excuse, but it's not an official channel, so I will never look at Slack because I hate Slack, right? Which is something I would be tempted to do until I gave up.
Yeah, and there are kind of cool ideas we can do with those bots. Maybe we should announce at least like creation of the discussion or creation or like a new email that starts a new subject. Like this shouldn't be too spammy. So maybe kind of like, improvement optimizations across those platforms would be, we don't need consensus about that, but some kind of experimentation. Okay. Are we trying this? We would like to update community page to highlight Slack and GitHub channels more. Or that's too much for people who might be kind of disagreeing with this.
So I think I'm fine. I know that Ben is kind of like a diehard IRC/Matrix user still. I don't know what he would say, but he's not here, so.
Yeah, and I think we kind of like, or maybe Ben himself was doing some kind of bridge improvements.
Yep, but he's like the last diehard user defending those channels against the orcs over there.
I know. Let's try in this room. We can change it later if needed. So first of all, we acknowledge that in practice, most discussions are happening in Slack and GitHub, not IRC and mailing list. Everyone agrees? Everyone acknowledges? Thank you. Anyone disagrees?
Maybe to not have the next one coming out of thin air, have a consensus. We acknowledge that we don't have an overwhelming consensus of avoiding Slack. Let's phrase it that way, right? That's very conservatively formulated, but that explains why we cannot just not use Slack, right?
So essentially, we don't have big reservations against Slack.
No, I have big reservations against Slack. We don't have a overwhelming consensus of leaving Slack. Right, that's the problem, right? We can only change the organically evolved state if we all agree to do it, right?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, this is just important to state, right?
Amazing. Okay, let's do it. So we don't have a consensus to leave Slack. Who agrees with that statement?
I mean, it's enough that one person objects violently to leaving Slack, then we don't have a consensus, and we all have to agree that we don't have a consensus.
Anyone disagree with this, that we still would like to leave the Slack? Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Maybe we should do a bit better of time boxing, but like it was really good discussion just to get perspectives and different ideas what we can do more. So maybe I will run some feedback forms like regularly as well for those dev summits. We have some feedback from the last dev summit actually. I'll try to summarize, but I think we went through two topics. Could be worse. So thank you.
Those were both pretty deep topics, and we had
and don't be late.
We had a lot of content in here, right? We didn't just run in circles.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice evening or rest of your day. Bye-bye.